All right, so we're going to continue on with our study on biomes. We've done the three different types of forest: the temperate deciduous forest, the tropical rainforest, and the taiga. Again, we're focusing on the differences between these two, not so much the biotic differences, but the abiotic differences that cause the biotic differences. So the non-living factors like the temperature, precipitation, how high above sea level it is, the latitude that it is. And if we look at the map, we can see patterns on how these things go. So if you'll notice, all the tropical rainforest is around the belt of the Earth, around the equator, between the two tropics. If you'll notice, there's when there's a desert and grassland, whether it's a tropical savanna or grassland, and a forest of some type, they're in that order. It goes, desert, grassland, forest, desert, grassland, forest, desert, grassland, forest, desert, grassland, forest. Even over here, desert, grassland, forest. There's patterns that you can see as we're going through the biomes that happen. And the reason that that's there is because there's a difference in rainfall. The difference between a desert and a grassland and a forest, a huge major difference, one of, if not the major difference, is the amount of rainfall that there is. So there's not an imaginary line where you can jump into the desert and then back into the grassland, but there's a transition there, and that main abiotic factor is the amount of precipitation. So let's go down here, scroll down to grasslands. And again, you can access this slideshow from your online notebook. There's a grassland song that's kind of catchy, slightly annoying, but you guys tend to like it. So grasslands, surprisingly, just like the forests that are the main vegetation is trees, the main vegetation here are grasses. So grasslands are the main vegetation. These biomes are typically found between forests and deserts. And again, that's because of the amount of rainfall that's there. So if a grassland had less rain, a good bit less rain, then it would become a desert. If a grassland had a good bit more rain, substantially a larger amount of rain, then they would become forests. These biomes exist on every continent. You'll see that if you look at those maps of the biomes, they exist on every single continent. And there's a bunch of different names for grasslands. So these are facts that are just generally true for grasslands. And then we'll talk about specific grasslands here, or in a second. So grasslands, one of the major themes that you'll see, whether you're talking about an African savanna, like a tropical savanna, or you're talking about a temperate grassland like we have in North America, there are differences, but the huge similarity that you're going to see are herbivores that eat grass, because there's a huge amount of grass. And the way that grass and these herbivores have evolved, the grass gets destroyed when these herds come through, eaten down, trampled, little divots all in the ground. It's not like a lawnmower going by. It's like a huge, several 100-pound organism, a buffalo or a antelope or something like that, coming through, wildebeest coming through and trampling, and their hooves digging into the dirt, making little divots. And then when it rains, those little hoof marks fill up with water. The grass starts growing back because of small little ponds all over the place that are holding water, and they grow back. Now, this grass isn't eaten day after day after day after day after day. It's eaten, and as the herbivores are walking through, they're eating, and it looks horrible. And then it takes several weeks for it to grow back, and it grows back even stronger. The grass likes to be cut back. So when you cut your grass and you think you're harming the grass, to a certain extent, that's exactly what the grass wants to do. That's why it bounces back. So if you cut your grass really short, it's probably going to grow back a lot faster than if you were to cut your grass at a higher height. That's part of its genetics, is to bounce back. But one similarity we see with biotic organisms, because there's so much grass, is large herds of herbivores. And then if you know the food chain, then you have packs of animals that are going to go hunt these herbivores, whether that's wolves or whether that's lions or hyenas or cheetahs or whatever it is. But the herbivores mainly eat grass in the grassland. All right, so focus on temperate grasslands. So we talked about, these other two slides are grasslands in general, where the main vegetation is grass. A temperate grassland, like we've talked about, has mild temperatures. They're not going crazy extreme one way or crazy extreme the other way. It is a pretty steady, mild climate. There might be snow, there might be pretty warm days, but it's not going to be either extreme. It's going to be kind of a transition from one to the next. This biome has mixed grasses with various plants and a few trees. And if you notice, the rainfall is a little bit less than the temperate forest. The temperate forest was from 75 to 115 or 125. This is right below that. So if you get not just 1 centimeter more, but on average, if you get more than 75 to 80 centimeters, you're going to be able to sustain trees. If you have less than that, it's going to be a grassland. And we'll notice later, less than 25 will be what biome? It'll be a desert. So we have deserts and then grasslands and then temperate deciduous forests. All right, then we'll get to a savanna. We've mentioned savannas in class, and you've seen videos and pictures and stuff. But a savanna is typically in Africa. They're a tropical grassland with a bunch of scattered trees. They have a rainy season and a dry season. If you'll compare that back to here where we have a summer and a winter, where there's a transition, there is some cold time and there's some warm time. In a savanna, it's more so a rainy season and a dry season. So you have a rainy season where there might be huge swaths of land covered in water, and then it doesn't rain for a long time, and the ground actually starts cracking. And if you'll compare, the savanna, the tropical grassland, with a tropical rainforest, it has less rainfall. Even though it has more rainfall than, say, where we live in the temperate deciduous forest, it has way less rainfall than a tropical rainforest. And because there's so much heat and so much direct heat throughout the year, because it's in the tropics, it doesn't have seasons like we think of seasons. It has seasons where there's a ton of rain and then it's very dry, and then a lot of rain and it's very dry. So adaptations, plants and animals have to adapt to do this. They either have to be able to store water, they need to be able to go dormant during the dry season. There's some animals that can actually burrow down into the ground. When it's wet, they'll come out, they'll reproduce, have babies, and then those babies will burrow down into the ground where there's just a little bit of moisture. And then when it rains again, they'll come up. Fish, frogs can do this. Some animals have adapted. Some fish can kind of jump around from watering hole to watering hole looking for water. Just very cool adaptations for this biome. Here's an example of a baobab tree. It's able to store a lot of water. You can see this is from the rainy season to the dry season. Different transitions. You can look here on the map. You see North America, parts of Europe and Asia, and part of South America is a temperate grassland, and these tropical grasslands are found mostly in the tropics near the equator. I think mostly tropical grasslands or savannas being in Africa. And here on the top you have tropical grasslands, the savanna. Here at the bottom you have some animals from the temperate grasslands like North America. You have hyenas and giraffes and zebras and acacia trees. A lot of you do acacia trees for your food web, elephants. You have different snakes, buffalo. These are the two different types of grasslands split up. So you'll find a bunch of similar animals, a bunch of herbivores here, and then some lesser amounts of carnivores that eat those herbivores, because remember the energy, it starts trickling less and less and less as it goes up the food chain or across the food chain. And then later we'll talk about the desert.